when it comes to somebody wanting to achieve financial independence, and I ask you, hey, Mike, this is my number to achieve financial independence. What's your philosophy for being able to help someone or help yourself to achieve that and kind of reverse engineer that so I know the practicalities to actually get there?
Are they a brand new entrepreneur or do they already have a business?
You know what? Let's talk to the people that already have a business.
Cool.
They've already got a business. They're already making some money to good money. And now they're thinking about, how do I actually parlay this from I'm making money, now how do I grow wealth and create independence?
Yeah, awesome. So then it just comes down to how much do you keep, right? The interesting part about magic internet money is that it can come really easily. And, after you figure it out, it might take you 5 years to figure it out. But once you do, then you can go to millions of dollars a year pretty fast. And what I found is that most people in that position didn't come from money. And so they haven't been taught how to manage that level of income. And so, at least for me, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I made my first mill by 27. What did I do the next 5 to 10 years? Spent it on cars, boats, and all the stuff I had on my vision board, right? That they teach you how to do in the beginning, create your vision board. And so unfortunately, that doesn't allow you to achieve financial freedom. Now you just have a really high income, but you also have a really high output. There was a time for me where my personal monthly expenses was like 50 grand a month, right? So I think getting clear and learning from people who've come before you, who've made money, if you didn't have, that information from your parents, is number one. And then it's putting together a plan. If you don't have a plan for your money, it will end up in the hands of somebody else who does have a plan for your money. And guess what? The world is filled with people and companies who have plans for your money. Apple, Ferrari, Porsche. And not only that, they have access to the smartest people and technology on the planet that is designed to extract the money from your pocket and to put it into theirs. So from a psychology perspective and a technology perspective, you're literally going up against weapons that are designed to take that out of your bank account, right? So if you don't have a conscious awareness of that and a plan to defend it against that, then it's gone. So I'd say that's number one. And then number two, getting really realistic about your personality type is extremely important. There's something that Michelle and I talk about called an inverted dopamine response. How are you wired when it comes to risk? Most entrepreneurs are wired for risk. That's why we can do what we do and why other people are freaked out by the thought of even attempting to go start a business. We're really comfortable with risk. And so when you apply that to the money that you make and investing, well, it can be very easy to want to go invest that in a high risk, high reward way, which usually does not work out, right? So it's never going to allow you to build wealth. I went through a whole cycle years ago where, I'd 100 grand for this private equity startup and 100 grand for this startup and 100 grand for this startup, 250 grand for this startup. And 2 out of 7 paid off. And not enough to cover what was lost, right? The same thing with crypto. Crypto is very high risk, high reward, unless you're just kind of sticking to Bitcoin over the long run. And so it's being very honest with yourself is how are you neurochemically wired right now? Are you still wired for risk? And at the end of the day, what I realized is that comfort with risk-taking is really a trauma response. Most entrepreneurs, when they're young, went through a traumatic childhood in some form or fashion that had a lot of adrenaline involved. Not everybody, I'm going to say 80%, at least the entrepreneurs I've talked to, whether that's being bullied, sexual abuse, whatever it may be, your body got used to being in a highly adrenalized state for a very young age, and that became normal for you and for me. And so when you get to a place of financial security and you're making a ton of money and your business is on a roll and it's kind of just chugging along on its own, what I've found, and I've seen over and over and over again, is that that's the point when the entrepreneur starts to get restless and they find a way to sabotage the business, or they come up with the most expensive phrase that exists on the planet for an entrepreneur, which is, wouldn't it be cool if? Right? Especially if you're developing software.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this, or we could do that, or hardware like I did? Wouldn't it be cool if the hardware could do this? And then there's another $1 million, right? Or they'll go get bored with that business and they'll want to start another business. And at the end of the day, the decision that they're making in their mind makes perfect sense logically on why they're making that decision. But behind that logic is actually a neurochemical addiction to adrenaline that they're no longer getting anymore, that they're then going to go pursue. So I think the next piece of the puzzle is being honest with yourself. How am I with the money that I'm currently making? What am I currently doing with it? And a lot of business owners get caught in something called the make it, spend it, risk it cycle. So they'll make it and then they'll spend it either on a toy or something lifestyle-wise, or they'll risk it on their business or an investment venture of some kind. And eventually those things don't work out, or they run their course and then the cycle starts again, right? So what are you doing with the money that you're making right now? Are you saving it? Are you protecting it? Or are you spending it or risking it? And just being very honest with yourself is, I think, step number 2. And then step number 3, if you're in that make it, spend it, risk it cycle, then it really comes down to addressing the core deep issues behind that that's driving that behavior. And if you don't address that, then the cycle is not going to stop. So what I've seen and what I've experienced in my life is I've made tens of millions of dollars, and all of that money, for the most part, was spent or put in other ventures that I've started up, right? And that cycle would have continued until I identified what I'm sharing with you now in my own life, and then did the work I needed to do in order to address the trauma that I went through in order to stop that behavior and feel at peace. And then that peace and sense of groundedness is what allows you to then start keeping what you've made and then start to grow it over a long period of time. Investing at the end of the day and building wealth is super easy. It's 3 things. Invest in real assets consistently over a long period of time. That's it. That's all you have to do to build 8 figures in wealth. Invest in real assets consistently over a long period of time. There's a great story that I talk about, a guy named Ronald Reed, who was a janitor, fought in World War II, and then a gas station attendant. So he was a janitor at Sears and then a gas station attendant for 50 plus years of his life. And when he died, he, had over $8-9 million in an investment account. It's because the dude just took the money, invested it in real assets consistently over a long period of time, and he didn't spend it, right? So that's all there is to it. If you've got 20 or 30 years that you can allow time to do its magic and compound for you, a small amount of money, $1 million, can turn into a significant amount of money over that period of time. You'll never have to work again. So that's really, the 3 pieces that I would really focus on and think about, journal about, and then work on. For me, I found that it's really helpful to put a system in place. So when the money comes in, a certain percentage of it is automatically allocated to a bank account for taxes. Another percent is automatically allocated to your brokerage account. So for us, we have a weekly transfer set up where it's just automatically drafted from the business account right into the investment account. I don't have to think about it, because if you don't automate that process, entrepreneurs' incomes tend to swing so wildly month to month that it becomes very hard to create that consistent part. Invest in real assets consistently. The consistency comes from the automation. So setting that up with an automated transfer is life-changing. And then I think doing a real exercise when it comes to your expenses is mind-blowing for entrepreneurs, because our expenses are different than a normal person's. So if you think about it from a net profit perspective, right? So let's just say our business makes a 30% net profit. Somebody else who's making a typical income, what they bring home is what they bring home. That's 100% profit for them. If you and I make $10,000, and that hits our bank account, it feels like we made $10,000 in that moment, right? Like, what did my Stripe account send to my bank account this morning? Oh, cool, I made $3,000 yesterday. Awesome. That's not the case. You actually, at the end of the day, only made $1,000, but our brain's like, oh no, I made $3,000. I'm going to go buy the new gun that I want, or whatever it may be, right? And so your expenses are actually 3 times more than they cost, right? So if you've got a car payment of $3,000 and you're running on a 30% profit margin, then you had to make roughly, 3 times that, $9,000 to pay that car payment. So $9,000 in sales is what you had to generate that month to pay for that car. Would you actually pay $9,000 for that car at the end of the day?
Love that framing.
No. And it's, when I first realized that for myself, I was like, oh shit. And I changed all my cars out. I changed all the other expenses that I had out. Because I'm like, man, I'm having to make $150,000 a month just to pay for these bills. And that's insane.
Yeah.
So I think understanding what things actually cost you is super important. And when you combine everything that I've just shared with you, it's impossible not to build wealth. Getting back to the inverted dopamine response piece, people who have a normalized dopamine response, it means that what do you get pleasure from? Guys like Warren Buffett have a dopamine response where they receive pleasure when they save money and invest it and watch it grow, and they get a cortisol response and a stress response when they lose it or spend it. We all have friends that are in that category where you're like, hey, you want to go take this trip or do this expensive adventure thing or whatever. They're like, no. It'd stress me out, too much money. And for those people, it's easy to build wealth and save money because it's their default mode. If you don't have that and your default mode is what I call an inverted dopamine response, which means you get money when you get pleasure by spending money and taking risks, which is most entrepreneurs, you wire yourself up with caffeine in the morning, at least when you're in the young stages, and then at night it's alcohol to wind down, and that all costs money, right? So dopamine at the end of the day is the antidote to cortisol. And so when your body's feeling a bunch of stress and cortisol, it wants you to go pursue things that will give it dopamine to reduce that. And in our modern day and age, that typically requires us to spend money. And so throw in advertising on top of that, and people in the Western world have basically been trained to have an addiction to spending money in order to receive dopamine, whether that's shopping or food or whatever it may be. And that creates this inverted dopamine response. And if you have that as your default mode network, then it is nearly impossible to build long-term wealth because your body is going to be stressed. You're going to be stressed. You watch the media, you get stressed about the world, whatever it may be, your relationship. You want to go pursue pleasure. That requires spending money. And then that just becomes this addiction cycle that keeps people broke. And that's why I think so many people are in that state right now.
What I find so fascinating, when you say the reverse dopamine response, I'd never put those words to this example that I'm going to share, because I had a lot of entrepreneurs being like, oh, Chris, you're in such good shape. What are you doing? How do I get in shape like that? And they kept using the word discipline with me. And I was like, I don't think it's discipline at all. And then I came to this kind of idea or concept or insight. I was like, no, actually, you know what? I think what's happened is I've done what I've done to get to a point where I feel good not eating the food that you are succumbing to. And I think it was like, oh, I'm getting the reverse dopamine response by, say, pushing the plate away or by saying no.
It would cause you more stress than pleasure to eat it.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. So therefore so I love how you've answered the question through, this is what happens emotionally, but this is also what's happening biologically with me as well. Because one of the threads I wanted to pull with you essentially is, what are the common characteristics or traits of an identity of somebody that builds wealth?
That's what I was just going to say. Once you shift your default mode network and you change it, well, then that becomes your new identity. Because when something's your default, it requires zero effort or discipline in order to to execute on. It's just the way you are. And that's how you are with fitness. That's how I am with food and alcohol. I used to have alcohol for dinner every night, just drinks 4 or 5 nights a week for 20 years. It was my default mode network. And then I stopped that behavior. I changed it, and I haven't had alcohol in 5 years. And I don't want it, and I don't need it, and I don't crave it, and it's not an issue. It's the new default mode network, which just becomes your new identity.
That's so interesting. I've never thought about it like that, because I haven't drank alcohol in 11 years now. And it's funny because it just does not register one iota of interest in me, like, at all. People get weirded out when you go out and it's like, no, like, I don't drink, and they're clearly projecting whatever their beliefs are around it. But I was just like, no, I have just no interest in it whatsoever. So how do I engineer the interest and the traits and the beliefs and the behaviors for wealth building, for being able to, so for example, and I followed your advice many years ago, and I think in the moment where you said weekly deposits, I actually have daily deposits. So it's $1,000 every day from the business account just to the investment account. I was like, all right, I'm just going to start here, and whatever's left over from profit from the rest of it, then I can allocate that elsewhere as well. But that's the minimum threshold. And when I started that, it was just lightening for me. I was just like, oh my God, I didn't have to think about it. That's really cool that it's happening. And then it just builds and grows without you having to think about that as well. And I think that's where you said so wisely, where there is the asset consistently long time. So firstly, Mike, how do you define the asset in which we should actually put our money towards?
That's where it gets super individualized, right? So there's 2 ways that most people invest. One is, I want to be hands off, and I don't want to think about it, and I want it to be conservative and in something safe. And then that would be investing in something like an index fund, right? For most people. And then there's other people like me who like to go super deep, OCD, autistic style, down a rabbit hole.
I watch your videos and I love them.
Yeah. So for me, it's been crypto and tech, right? So for me, crypto and AI, sort of specifically Tesla, is something that I spend an hour minimum on every single day, just because I absolutely love those 2 subjects. And I know everything there is to know about Tesla. I know everything there is to know about what's going on with Bitcoin and crypto.
Were you the one that got Alex Schafrin onto Teslas? Because I was with Alex and Katie yesterday, and they were just raving about Teslas the entire time.
Yeah, and so, I know everything that's going on from a company perspective and what Elon's up to, and I look out into the future and I see where things are going. And so for me, I want to be very hands-on, and I'm picking and choosing what I want to invest in, right? And then it comes down to, what are your goals? Is it growth, or is it income? You could go out and buy a house in real estate for cash and rent that out and make $5,000 a month in cash, which has massive advantages to it as well. So, or you could invest in growth stocks like Tesla, which have a potential return of anywhere from 20 to 50% a year, or same with Bitcoin, average return 45% a year, through the good and through the bad, and build up a bigger war chest. At that point, you can then go swap that into real estate and something conservative, right? So that's a very individual question that comes down to, what are you personally interested in? Do you want to follow something? What's your risk tolerance, and what's your time horizon, and what's your goal? Right? Because somebody's investment strategy could be very different if they're 30 years old versus 60 years old. So I think it just comes down to, once again, being honest with yourself as far as, hey, do I want to actively manage my portfolio, or do I not? And that's question number 1. And then 2, what's my time horizon? 3, what's my goal?
I'm going to ask this question as a selfish person for myself right now. When it comes to, so I just had the thought of, okay, so for myself, the investing has been property, index funds, and crypto. And I then had the thought, when you said Tesla, I was like, what's the difference between, let's say, you wanting to invest in Tesla, and like compared to the difference of trying to find the NVIDIA that we could have invested in doing not so long ago, that we went like that.
Yeah.
As myself as an entrepreneur, is there any kind of guidance that you could give me when it comes to how much time allocation there should be? Because the way that I think about it right now is like, I have this skill set of being able to build this company, build my partners' businesses. How much time should I then allocate to the growing of the wealth compared to the making of the money? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It doesn't take a ton of time. Again, if I dive into that stuff for an hour a day because I love it, like that's my hobby, right? So I'm not doing that necessarily because I'm trying to like change or alter my investment decision. It's like, no, I'm super interested in the technology and where things are going and how they're changing. And at the same time, I think the question that I consider or think about is, why are you investing in these assets? Because right now at this point in history, we're at the single craziest inflection point of humankind ever, as far as what's happening right now and what's going to happen over the next 10 years. We are going to experience changes that are unprecedented and that have never been seen by humanity before. Bitcoin is one of those changes. We've never had a form of money that is completely independent, that wasn't issued by a government or a king, that isn't controlled by anybody, that's global and that can't be stopped and that's private. It's never happened in all of human history before. So that's something to be paying attention to. And it's obviously the best investment in human history, and it will probably continue to be, in that same category. And then you look at the changes that are happening from an AI perspective right now. You and I can't even comprehend what is going to be available 10 years from now. The change isn't happening on a linear scale. It's happening on an exponential scale, which is, for the most part, not comprehensible by humans, right? When things start to get into that edge. Yeah, things like, AI, ChatGPT 4.0 came out this year, then 5.0 last year. Well, it's not a 20% change or even 100% change. It's a 20,000% change in a year. And so then you look at robotics and what Optimus is going to be doing from Tesla's Optimus bot, and what's going to be happening with that, with Robotaxi, which is coming out next month. And even just 5 years from now, I was talking about this with Chase in the car the other day. We're at a stoplight, and he's like, how's the world going to be different, 5 years from now? I was like, well, in the next 5, 10 years from now, the cars around us are not going to have drivers in them. And we're probably going to see a bunch of robots walking down the street, walking a dog. And the fact that that's going to happen in the next 60 to 120 months is mind-blowing, right? And that's going to cause changes that we can't foresee. But from an investment perspective, I know that it's probably a really good idea to own equity in the companies that are bringing about those changes. I don't know if the average person is going to have a job 10 years from now. I look at any industry, you can look at any industry that we want, and we can talk about AI is going to be able to do that job better and cheaper 10 years from now than any human. And that includes jobs that you think are safe, like brain surgeons, doctors, radiologists. One of our best friends, Dan Stickler here in town, it's the top end of tech when it comes to longevity tech. He's like, I don't want to see a human doctor at this point, because Michelle and I have done something that Prenuvo scan, full body MRI scan that uses AI to then look for stuff in your system that might be an issue so that you can catch it a decade before, 5 years before any other human doctor could. And a human doctor can't look at a full body MRI and find the needle in the haystack where AI can. And so that tech is coming. It's already here, but it's going to go more mainstream. Anything that requires driving a vehicle is going to be taken over by AI in the next 5 to 10 years. Lawyers, the understudies at law firms that do all the research are going to be gone and replaced with AI. We already see that happening with Onik and his FTC AI software for, making sure you have compliant marketing with AI now. And that's going to happen in every industry. We've already started to see it in fast food restaurants. And so I don't know where humans are going to have a place, which means the only option is get rid of the humans, a lot of them, or subsidize them in the form of universal basic income. So people will make enough money to sit at home and buy their McDonald's and watch their TV shows, but that's going to be about it. Are they going to be able to rent a home for $5,000 a month, $4,000 a month, $3,000 a month? I don't know. So I think the investment landscape changes significantly over the next 10 years in ways that we can't comprehend, other than I think it's a really good idea to go own stock in the companies that are facilitating that change.
What is the healthy mindset that you believe that we should have going into this change?
The nice part about humans is that we're unbelievably creative, and these new technologies will also create new opportunities for the people who are willing to go out and turn them into using them into a skill set. So we had a call last week with our coaching group that was super interesting and really valuable, because I had a gentleman on who was probably mid to late 50s, and he's really getting into marketing, and he has been for a few years now. And he's like, how do I apply this skill set into a specific niche? And I'm like, okay, let's just say he's 60 years old. You're at a certain demographic where it's quite odd to see someone at your age talking about social media marketing or SEO or things like that. And I was like, but that could also be your biggest advantage. And so there's an entire world of small businesses all around you in your city, run by people who are in a similar age category as you, who have no idea how to do any of this stuff. They don't know how to use SEO. They don't know how to use AI. They don't know how to set up an automated AI chatbot. They don't know how to use ManyChat to set up, an automation, for DMs on Instagram. And they're not really going to be super receptive to a 23-year-old who walks in and starts talking this jargon to them that goes way over their head and makes them feel dumb. And I was like, but if you walk in and you're the same age category and you can understand how they grew up and the environment that they're in, how this stuff is intimidating, you can communicate what this stuff can do in terms that they can understand, then that becomes a massive opportunity for you. And I was like, man, you can go out, and I love niche businesses where there's tens of thousands of them. So the example I gave him was local pizzerias. So I watch Dave Portnoy's pizza reviews every day that he puts out, and I just freaking love it, and the conversations that he has with these small business owners. And he's been doing that a pizza review every day for over a decade. And he still hasn't even come close to touching all of the pizzerias in the United States, right? So there's that many mom and pop shops out there. And so if you came up Alex Hormozy style with gyms, with one marketing innovation that integrates AI just into pizzerias that help them increase their sales by 10 to 15% a day, you revolutionize that entire industry, and you can duplicate it over 100,000 different pizza locations. So let's just say it's an AI bot that's on their website that they can then type their order in or whatever it may be, or it follows up with them, or it gathers their email address and it knows their name. And let's say you have a slow night of the week on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you set up an automation, with a CRM that sends out a personalized email to them at minimum, or a text message with a coupon or discount. Hey, Chris, man, we loved seeing you, and it has their date. On the 20th last month when you got your pepperoni, we'd love to make you one tonight, and we'll give you a 10% discount or free delivery or whatever it may be, right? And all of that is automated. So it's happening in the background without you having to sit there in front of an CRM or send an email. And that creates a sales engine that changes that industry. So those opportunities are presenting themselves if you're willing to dive into the tech, learn it, and acquire those skill sets. But if you're not, then I think this leaves you behind very quickly, and you end up displaced. And so it really comes down to adapt or die. So,
yeah, we brought a guy in as our chief AI officer, and essentially at the beginning of the scope of the task was like, hey, look through all of our systems and see where we can do better. Like, how do we make it faster, better, and a lot easier for our team to then be able to execute, if not take that team member completely out of it. And it's interesting for me to try and see like where are the use cases of where AI is really going to like shine. And I don't think we really know that right now, but in the marketing world, it's already been extreme, not, I would say revolutionary, but extremely impactful for how we can have processes now where we can have a new partner come on board. They can do a video, take that transcript of that video that we need, and now we have all the information needed to build out their entire marketing ecosystem. And it's just like, and even to the degree of like, we can come up with the top 10 best hooks and angles for what we now want to start testing advertising campaigns with. And then it's writing the scripts, and then it's putting together the actual creatives for it. And it's just like, this is remarkable how much easier this is as well. And I knew that I had to make that investment just to figure out what I don't know. Because I was like, I didn't even know where I should be looking right now. How do I actually start using this technology properly?
It's a really random thing, but one of the biggest things that's blown me away just in the last week is, whenever you are using a software platform and you are figuring out for the first time and you have a question and you need to ask someone for help, you're like, now I've got to submit a ticket and it's going to be till tomorrow till I get a response. And you've always got that little chat box in the bottom right of the screen where hi, I'm your AI bot, you can ask me. And I'm like, that shit never works. It's going to give me some generic response to an article that is not about what I'm looking for. And in the last 6 months, that has changed. Like, I've started using that little bot and giving it a shot, and the answers that I'm getting back are full-on AI conversations that are 100% useful. And I'm like, oh, this is faster than a human now, and it's better. The challenge, the one risk that I talk about as well when it comes to marketers and AI is to make sure you don't use it to replace the unique skill set that you bring to the table that sets you apart from everybody else. For me specifically, that's copywriting, right? It's being able to speak persuasively to my target audience. And that's traditionally been the biggest barrier to entry for any kind of entrepreneur. You have to learn how to sell. It's either over the phone or it's through the written word. And every single person, yourself, myself, who's made 7-8 figures online has gone through the process of mastering that skill set. And it usually takes 1 to 2 years to do and get really good at. But once you have it, it's a superpower. It's what allows everything you do to be effective. The ads that you write, the landing page that you create, the sales presentation, the webinar, whatever it may be, all of it is dependent upon that one single skill. So that's the first domino, right? And a lot of newbies don't want to do that. And then they get seduced by AI can write my sales letter for me. And
I've never seen it write good copy so far. Never seen it write good copy.
It'll write copy than someone who has zero skills whatsoever, but it's not good enough to compete in a marketplace where they're competing against people like you and I or anybody else who's mastered that. And if you're specifically using paid ads, you have to master that skill in order to compete at that level, or you simply won't be able to, right? It's a competitive marketplace, and if you can't compete, you're out of it.
And sorry, can I just say something specifically to talk to that? I think I sent you an email. I'm not sure, but anyway, you sent an email out a little while ago, and I was reading through it, and I was like, oh, this is such good copy. And I was just geeking out on it. I was loving it. And then I used that as a framework, and then I wrote a piece of copy for our stuff, and I called it the Dillard Disruptor. And it's our second best performing piece of copy at the moment. I'll have to try and find it and show you later about it. But it's that. But for me, I love marketing, love copywriting. I love the art of it, and I love just the creativity that comes through it as well. But it really is what I found for myself needing to be an obsession, because I found myself I don't scroll social media. I'm scrolling social media and I'm stopping at the ads. So I'll scroll and stop on the ad, scroll, stop on the ad, scroll, stop on the ad. And then I want to see what's actually going on in the marketplace. What are people saying, so that I can say something that is vastly different or contrarian in the marketplace, but also to see what the language is using as well. So if I come into a partner's business, I feel what are you saying? What is it that you need to say? So for example, we have one partner, he coaches, sales teams in the agricultural industry. So like super niche. Do you know what I mean? So like I can't come in and just start writing copy to talk to the agricultural industry, like for a sales, like, do you know what I mean? Like for a John Deere or something like that. I can't do that. I need to be able to do a lot of research to get to there as well. So I appreciate when I read good copy, like I take that and want to run with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the competitive advantage, right? And so when people want to get lazy and they want to use AI, it's going to be a mediocre result at best. And I don't care how good AI gets. It's never going to know your target audience. And most importantly, it's never going to have your lifetime of experiences to draw stories and inspiration from, right? To connect and communicate what you're trying to communicate. And so that's the risk, is trying to rely on these tools to generate a result. And the analogy that I use for folks is, so basically what you're saying is you want to get ripped, right? You want to just physically get in really good shape and get pumped, right? So you're going to go to the gym, but instead of you doing the reps, you're going to have a robot that you own sit next to you and do the reps. That's the same as having AI write copy for you. Not only do you not get the benefit that you're looking for, but you actually get weaker. And so if you start outsourcing your copy to AI, and then even if it's just headline ideas, even if it's social media angle ideas or hooks, every time you outsource that, you're giving away your power, and your literally neural network that allows you to do that really well decays, and it starts to get weaker. And if you do that over a year, that skill set's gone.
Well said.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that, because I need to hear that as well. But like one of my favorite times of the week, I'm such a geek when it comes to this, is having to go and like one of the main split tests we'll consistently run is the headline on the main landing page. And so I'm always trying to beat the control. So like my favorite time is like, oh, okay, it's Friday. I know I need to go look at what's winning, what's not winning, and then how do I beat the control that we've got there, sit down, write it, put it back together, and then go kind of like look at the seed that I planted the week after to see what's happened from there.
And it's easy to have AI come up with those headline options, right? But if you keep doing that, you're that mental swipe file that you have in your brain that puts all those unique combinations from all of the ads that you search comes to an end and decays, and then you'll find yourself non-competitive.
Yeah. Okay. I love this. When it comes to the consistently and the long time, and I think especially the long time, I think one of the wise things that we can do in so much of it, especially when it comes to business and what we want to achieve and money and wealth, is actually extending our time horizon. So rather than saying, I want to earn $10 million tomorrow, what if it was the case of, I want to have $10 million in the next 10 years? My strategy, my execution is going to be vastly different because of that. But there's also a bit more of a sense of peace that I can come, because I'm not having to do something that's so wild and that could push me beyond my limits, or could actually force me to do something that is high risk because I'm needing that high reward as well. So when it comes to the long time, what are the time horizons that you're thinking of? And then you help other people be able to kind of set it for themselves.
I mean, the default for me is always 30 years, because that's when compounding just goes straight up, right? The annual compounding return just gets insane if you have 30 years. And for me, I'm 46. So hopefully I've got 30 years, which is pretty cool to start about. If I was just starting from scratch today, you could pull out a compounding calculator and put 500 grand in there, a one-time investment, and over 30 years, that's probably going to end up between 10 and 20 mil, even if you never added an extra dollar at 10% a year, which is pretty cool to think about, right? So, obviously that's going to be relative based on everybody's age. The sooner you can start, the better. And you'll be amazed if you pull out a compounding calculator and you start with, $100 a month at the age of 18, what that turns into by the time you're 60. I think another big piece that's equally as important as the time horizon, again, because that's going to depend on everybody's age. Well, there's 2 points here, right? The older somebody is and the further they feel that they're behind, the more desperate they get, and that causes them to chase higher return things, which is the in most cases it's going to make the problem worse, because you're making decisions based on desperation and emotion rather than rational thought. And that's probably the most heartbreaking thing that I see in the entrepreneur space, is the old guys who come in and they're in their 60s and their even 70s, and they're broke and they don't have money to pay their bills, and they're trying to figure out how to make money online, and that just sucks. So the way Michelle and I, talk about it is paying your future self, right? So if you have a decision between buying a sports car or paying your future self, projecting yourself out into your 60s, 70s, what that money would turn into, and do the math on it. Instead of buying a $100,000 sports car, go put that in the market, see what that would be worth for your 65-year-old self, and then make the decision based on that, right? I think provides a lot of perspective on it. And then I think the biggest thing that people you just need to try to avoid is that high risk Hail Mary pass, because of the, things that have happened in your past, and you find yourself where you don't want to be. That's just, I forget. There was another thing that'll come to me here that I'll think of in a minute, but that was the big one.
What do you think are when you think of yourself and the other wealthy and content, happy, peaceful people that you know, what are the traits or characteristics that you can see there's a common thread between them?
I think the ultimate goal, so we talked about at the beginning, is what is your number, right? I think the number is getting to a place where you no longer have to work again, and reducing your lifestyle, whatever it may be. From an entrepreneur perspective, the most powerful position you can be in and the most effective is you get to show up every day and work on your vision without the need to bring in revenue. Because the need to bring in revenue will always compromise what you could eventually build. And it's hard, especially when you have a team and you're like, okay, we need to make payroll this month and we're 50 grand in revenue behind. We've got to pull a rabbit out of our hat and do that. And so you're going to end up making short-term decisions for short-term cash flow that compromise the long-term vision of the business. And so if you can get to a place where your bills are paid, whether it's through rental real estate or whatever it may be, and you don't have to work anymore, man, what you and I could create from that place is unbelievable. Like, that's the kind of thing where you could put, if you wanted to, 100% of your time and energy into a YouTube channel that just makes an impact on hundreds of millions of people over the course of years, from a legacy standpoint that costs nothing for them to consume. And eventually it turns into a monster business for you, but for the first 3 to 5 years, it's not going to produce much, but it doesn't matter because your income is taken care of, right?
Hormozy actually gave me the advice, it was a little while ago, and the conversation was about like growing an audience, which is something he's just like rocketed recently. And the advice was really simple. It was like, post consistently really quality content and do not make an offer for 2 years. And I was like, wow, yeah, like, because if you're just there, and personally, again, like, I'm getting close to what my number is. And it's interesting because as I move along this journey, I think it's my fearful desire of money, like my desire for money coming from a fearful lack perspective is just falling away by the wayside now. And that's not the case. And it's very much coming to the case of like, well, what do I want to bring into the world? Like, and quite literally the way that I thought about it was like being here, doing this trip, I was like, this has nothing to do with my money making machine, like at all. It's purely me having to spend a lot of money to do it, but I'm so happy to do it. And then also not knowing how I want to monetize it as well. And even me trying to not actually think about, well, hey, take that monetization, like I'm trying to take the entrepreneurial side out and be like, don't think about it that way, just think about it from a creative pursuit as well. And I think that's something, I appreciate you saying that because it gives me that kick up the arse to go like, I'll continue to move down that route because for me, I would be very interested within myself when I get to that point to then truly sit back and say, what do I want to do now? Like, who do I actually want to be without that need of whatsoever having to work for another dollar, because that's completely taken care of.
Yeah. For me, it'd be writing books and growing a YouTube show, podcast. Like, those are the most rewarding things that I love to do. The podcast, when I had it, made the biggest impact of anything I've ever made. I made zero money. I never had a single ad on it. I never promoted a single product, even my own, on it over 5 years. And it literally just changed tons of people's lives. And I was, that was before, we did an audio only, right? So this was before, I wish I had put it on YouTube, but I didn't. But if I had, it would have turned into something just amazing that was strictly for the value that it provided, not for any kind of financial gain.
Like, I remember years ago, when we were living back in Bali, I would be walking, I remember so vividly listening to you walking along these rice paddies, just like trying to just like ingrain it into my cells. I was just like, get in me. So I appreciate that. When are you going to be doing it again?
For me, it's just health related, still on my health journey. So I'm hoping next year. But that's, if I could do anything and magically, wave a magic wand, that's what I would be doing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What is I'll just ask it this way. What's the advice that you would give me for building wealth and doing it whilst having contentment and peace at the same time?
So the opposite of contentment and peace would be anxiety and fear, right? And anxiety and fear are always derived by a future imagined outcome, right? Anxiety and fear come from the future. Anger comes from the past. And so there's thoughts that you're having about an unknown in the future that are causing that anxiety and fear and not allowing you to have peace. So then I would identify what those are, and Michelle can take you through this process of, maybe a mental model and identifying what those are and figuring out if they're actually valid and, accurate or not. And I'm going to assume that they're 99% chance they're not, right? So if you can release those thoughts, then the fear and anxiety goes away. Then you get to sit in peace in the present.
Okay, the last question then. I found this come up with me, and this is my flawed self, where it's a case of, I find it interesting when I look at the numbers that we do now in the business and the profit that I can take each month, and there is that lure of me always wanting more. And I find it, on one side, there's this rational part of me that's like, that's absolutely incredible. Like, that's so much further beyond than what you thought you could ever do. And then there's this other side that's like, yeah, you should be doing more. Like, why can't you 10x it? And I was like, I want to see what you would say, Mike, when it just comes to not wanting to chase after something that is actually going to take you away from ultimately what you're looking for at the end of the day. And that's why I was like, okay, I know what my number is. I know what
But then when you get there, you're going to change the number.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the age-old. I mean, that's the whole joke in the yacht world. As soon as you buy a yacht and then you see one that's bigger than yours, then you have to go do whatever you need to get the bigger one, right? So I think it just comes down to there's usually two components around that. It's your neurochemical addiction to dopamine, that wants more. And as you get success and you achieve nice things, nice houses, nice cars that give you pleasure, you're like, oh, I want more of that, right? And unfortunately, your brain gets used to dopamine the same way your body gets used to caffeine. And so the more caffeine you have, the more your body gets used to it, the more you need to go get. And I went through this, I'll just use a funny example, in my car collecting world. One of the most amazing moments in my life is picking up my first Ferrari from the dealership that I custom designed, and it came in 6 months later. And it's just like, wow. Second Ferrari was, cool. third Ferrari was, I'm driving around the street and some kid stops me and he's like, wow. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. For me, it was just what I drove around town, but that dopamine was gone, right? And so, well, then do you need to go buy the Bugatti or the whatever in order to get that next fix? And it just never stops. So there's a neurochemical component of that. And then there's a subconscious mind program around that as well that usually stems from a story of I'm not good enough. And if that's not resolved, then you'll continue to feel not good enough and you'll continue to go demonstrate to the world or attempt to by building bigger. Right? You look at what Alex is doing where he talks about the same thing. First it was a mil, then 10 mil, then 100 mil, now it's a bill. You know, he's aware of it. So he's really consciously aware of the fact that he doesn't need that and it's not going to change his life in any material way. For him, it's just a game that he wants to go play and do. And he has fun doing it. So I would say he's coming at it from a healthy perspective rather than from a I'm not enough perspective. And so I think it comes down to identifying what's the story that's playing out here. It's almost like a computer program and figuring out what that is and then resolving that.
Yeah, and I think that I put this G.K. Chesterton quote in this essay I recently wrote, and it was, to have that much amount of money, you got to be stupid enough to want it in the first place. And I think for me, what I was trying to have some solace in is, what's the intention behind why I'm doing something? So if I'm wanting to earn money because it gives me the ability to be effectively altruistic with it, well, then that intention is, I would say, positive. If it's an intention of I'm just not worthy and I'm not good enough and I've got these deep-rooted problems within my psyche that I'm then having to go out and achieve more and more and more. And I have come from that world where the most common theme of all the bloody therapy and psychedelics and everything that's been done from myself was a sense of unworthiness and not being enough.
That's 99% of entrepreneurs.
And I know that's what drove me for money. I know that's what especially drove me to want to get in shape and like all of these things. So it was an effective fuel to get something done, but it's still a toxic fuel as well. And I don't think it lasts very long. And it could probably blow up the car if you continue to try and use that fuel as well.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs are wounded people who consciously chose a productive way to direct that energy. And there's other people who choose unproductive ways in the forms of drugs, alcohol, violence, whatever it may be. So
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where does everybody go to get more of what you're doing and become a part of it?
Audiencefactory.com is probably where I'd start. And that's what we're focused on now, and helping people build their audience and their email list, which is something I've loved doing for decades. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, I will definitely put the links to that. And just FYI, I bought access to Audience Factory when you first came out with it. And so I highly recommend it. It is absolutely glorious. And the way that you deliver it as well, like we're kind of talking about this before off camera, but the way that you share what it is that you share is so effective. It's brilliant.
Oh, thank you, man.
No, it really is, because I know from in the coaching and information world, there is so much, I know that it's coming from somebody that is so well versed in what it is that they're sharing, and it's not someone regurgitating something that they kind of had another coach say or anything like that. And it's truly been transmuted through experience. I've just found it so effective. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. This was super fun.